My name is Marisol Reyes Hartley. I was 26 when the basement door locked behind me, and the only sound left in the world was my own breathing. I want to tell you, it started with pain. It didn't. It started with a dress. 3 weeks before my sister's wedding, my mother hung a garment bag on the back of my bedroom door and said, "This is for you to wear, so you don't upstage her." I laughed, because that's what you do when your mother says something cruel with a smile on her face. You laugh, so the cruelty has somewhere to land besides your chest. Inside the bag was a beige dress, shapeless, the color of a hospital waiting room. I was 8 months pregnant. There wasn't much upstaging left in me to give. I should explain who we were, before the water broke, before the door, before the freeze. I was the older daughter. Priya was the younger one, engaged to a cardiologist named Theo, marrying into the kind of wedding my mother had always wanted for herself. String quartet, imported peonies, a guest list with 300 names on it. I had married 2 years earlier, quietly at a courthouse, to a machinist named Callum who fixed industrial looms for a living and who my mother had described, at Thanksgiving, in front of his own mother, as a starter husband. I had not left the room. I wish I could say I had. My pregnancy was, by family consensus, an inconvenience of timing. I was due 3 weeks after Priya's wedding. Nobody said this to my face as an accusation, but it lived underneath every conversation like a draft under a door, cold, constant, unacknowledged. My mother rearranged the seating chart twice because my due date made her nervous for the photos. I told her the baby would come when the baby came. She told me babies come early in this family and looked at me in a way that made the sentence feel like a warning rather than a fact. Here is what I did not know yet. That warning was a plan. The night before the wedding, I helped steam the tablecloths in my mother's garage until 11. My back ached in a way I dismissed as sciatica, the same dull throb I'd had for a week. Callum wanted to take me home early. My mother said, "She's fine. Aren't you fine, Mari?" And I said I was fine because in my family fine was the toll you paid to be allowed to stay in the room where things were happening. I woke at 5 a.m. to a warmth spreading under me that had nothing to do with warmth. I lay very still in the gray dark, doing the arithmetic every pregnant woman does in that first disbelieving second. Too early, 3 weeks too early. This can't be, before the second contraction told me the math didn't matter anymore. Callum was already gone, called in for a plant emergency shift he couldn't refuse, the kind of job where you don't get paid if you don't show. I was staying at my parents' house for wedding week convenience, in my childhood bedroom, 20 feet from my mother's door. I called for her before I called anyone else. That was the last ordinary decision I made that day. She came in wearing her robe, took one look at the sheets, and her face did something I had never seen it do before. Not panic, not tenderness, but calculation. I know now what I was watching. I did not know then. I only knew that instead of reaching for her phone, she reached for mine. "Not today," she said, very quietly, almost gently, the way you'd say it to a child asking for candy before dinner. "Priya gets today." I laughed, that same reflexive laugh, the one built to absorb impossible things, because surely, this was a joke poorly timed, this was fear talking, this was anything other than what it was. Then she took my phone off the nightstand and put it in her robe pocket, and I understood that it was not a joke, and the laugh died somewhere behind my sternum and never really came back the same. The basement of my parents' house had been finished when I was 12, wood paneling, a pull-out couch, a small bathroom my father had added for guests, though we'd never once had a guest stay there. It smelled like cedar and old carpet. There was one small window, high on the wall, painted shut decades ago, offering a rectangle of gray morning sky and nothing else. My mother walked me down the stairs with one hand under my elbow, the same hand that had steadied me down icy sidewalks as a child, and I let her, because some animal part of me still believed a mother's hand meant safety, even as the rest of me was screaming that it didn't. Not this time, not this hand, not today. "You'll be more comfortable down here," she said. Quiet. No stairs to climb later. As if this were about my comfort. As if a woman does not know the difference between a room prepared for her and a room prepared to hold her. The door had a lock on the outside. My father had installed it years ago, after a break-in scare in the neighborhood, a lock meant to keep danger out. I heard it turn from the other side and understood, with a strange calm that arrives sometimes in the worst moments, that today it was being used to keep danger in, and the danger was me and my inconvenient body and my inconvenient timing on my sister's very convenient day. I want to be honest about what I felt because the honest thing surprised me. Not rage, not yet. Grief. A grief so specific it had edges. The grief of understanding exactly, for the first time with total clarity, where I ranked in the architecture of my family. Not last. Last would have been simple. I ranked exactly high enough to be useful, exactly low enough to be locked in a basement, so I would not inconvenience the ranking above me. The contractions came in waves I could set a clock to. If I'd had a clock, if I'd had my phone, if I'd had anything except a paint-sealed window and cedar-smelling walls and the sound, faint through the floorboards, of a string quartet warming up in the backyard 3 hours later. I did the only thing available to a person with no phone and a locked door. I paid attention. I noted the exact angle of light through the window and how it moved across the floor, marking time the way I imagine prisoners have always marked time, in patient, animal increments. I put my hand flat on my belly and talked to my daughter. I didn't know yet she was a daughter, but I called her one anyway, some instinct ahead of the ultrasound, and told her that whatever was happening upstairs, whatever this house had decided about the order of things, she was not an inconvenience. She was the only appointment I intended to keep that day. Somewhere around noon, I heard the guests arriving. Car doors. Laughter. My father's voice, warm and public, welcoming people to a wedding 1 floor above his daughter's labor. I screamed once, as loud as I could, and the quartet, 3 hours in, must have covered it, because no one came. I want you to understand, I am not telling you this for pity. I am telling you this because I need you to understand what my husband walked into 4 hours later, when the plant finally released him and he drove to the house to bring me lunch, expecting to find his very pregnant wife folding napkins, and instead found a locked basement door and, behind it, everything. Callum was not a loud man. In 2 years of marriage, I had heard him raise his voice exactly once, at a driver who nearly hit a kid on a bike. He fixed machines that wove thread into fabric, thousands of threads at once, each one needing to be exactly where it belonged, or the whole cloth came apart. He noticed when things were not where they belonged. It was, I think now, the whole shape of who he was. He told me later that he knew something was wrong before he even reached the porch, my car in the driveway, no me in the house, the particular silence of a house performing a party. He asked my father, in passing, lightly, where I was. My father, to his credit or his cowardice, could not meet his eyes and said, "Ask your mother-in-law." He found my mother near the dessert table, adjusting a tier of the cake. He asked her where I was. She said, lightly, the way you deflect a question about parking, "She's resting downstairs. She'll be fine. She's being dramatic." He asked to see me. She said, "Later, Callum, let's not disrupt." He did not wait for the end of that sentence. My father told me afterward that Callum's face did not change at all, which was somehow more frightening to everyone watching than if he'd shouted. He walked into the house, found the basement door, found it locked, and knocked twice before putting his shoulder into it. Machinists know exactly how much force wood can take before it gives. The door gave on the second attempt. He found me on the pull-out couch, both hands gripping the cushion, 13 hours in, transition well underway, alone. I have replayed what happened next more times than I can count, turning it over the way you turn a stone looking for the vein of light inside it. He did not shout. He knelt beside me, put both hands on either side of my face, and said, so quietly that only I could hear it at first, "I've got you. I'm calling for help right now, and I am never letting anyone put a lock between us again." Then he stood, phone already dialing, and walked back up those stairs into the middle of his sister-in-law's wedding reception, 300 guests in silk and rented tuxedos turning toward the noise, and said the sentence that made the entire family freeze. "My wife has been in labor alone in your basement for 13 hours because you decided a party mattered more than her life." He didn't shout that either. He said it in the same flat, load-bearing voice he used to describe a broken gear, a fact stated so plainly it left no room to argue with it, only to sit inside it. The quartet stopped. Someone's champagne glass, I was told, simply slipped out of a hand and shattered on the flagstone, and no one moved to clean it up, because for one endless moment nobody in that yard was thinking about glass. I did not see the freeze. I was in an ambulance 11 minutes later, Callum's hand wrapped around mine, my mother's face the last thing I saw in that house, gone the color of the beige dress she'd hung on my door. What I know of the freeze, I know secondhand, in fragments, the way you know the weather of a country you've never visited, from people who were there, each account slightly different, all agreeing on the shape of the thing even where the details blur. My aunt told me the silence lasted almost a full minute. My father's best man, mid-toast rehearsal, simply lowered the microphone and did not lift it again. Priya, in her wedding dress, in the doorway of the house, heard her new husband's voice. Theo, the cardiologist, a man who had only known our family a year, ask, into that silence, "Is that true?" Not to Callum, but to my mother. My mother did not answer with words. She looked, I'm told, at the guests, at the peonies, at the quartet, at everything except her own daughter's husband, and in that looking, everyone understood the answer. Priya told me later, weeks later, in a different conversation, one I'll get to, that she stood in her wedding dress in that frozen yard and felt something break loose in her chest that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with 27 years of watching our mother rank us like place settings, and she had simply never had proof of it before, out loud, in front of witnesses, until that moment. Theo, to his enormous credit, did not resume the wedding. He walked to his new mother-in-law and said, quietly enough that only the nearest guests heard it, "We are done with the ceremony for today," and then he found his car keys and drove Priya, still in her dress, veil catching on the door handle, to the hospital, because some new husbands understand, on their very first day of marriage, exactly which family they've married into and exactly which side of it they intend to stand on. My daughter, Junie, was born at 6:42 that evening, 7 pounds 2 ounces, furious and pink and entirely, gloriously unaware of the day she'd chosen to arrive on. I remember almost nothing of the medical details. I remember Callum's face when they put her on my chest, the particular unraveling of a man who fixes things for a living finally getting to hold the one thing that had never been broken. I remember, too, the knock on the hospital room door 2 hours later, and Priya in the doorway, still, impossibly, in her wedding dress, the hem gone gray with hospital hallway dust, her veil gone, her hair half fallen from its careful pins. She did not say congratulations. She said, "I didn't know. I swear to you, Mari, I didn't know she locked you down there. I thought you were resting." I believed her. I want to be honest about that too. The story would be tidier if I'd had one villain and one ally clearly marked from the start, but truth is rarely tidy, and my sister's face in that doorway held the specific, bewildered grief of a person realizing the family she'd trusted had been quietly grading her worth against her sister's for her entire life, and she had simply never been shown the receipts before. She sat on the edge of my hospital bed, in her wedding dress, and held her tiny screaming niece, and cried in a way I had never once seen her cry, not at funerals, not at breakups, not ever, and I understood that this, too, was a kind of labor, the birth of a person finally seeing her mother clearly, and it was no less painful for happening in a hospital hallway instead of a basement. She came 4 days later, when I was home, when Junie was sleeping in the bassinet Callum had built the year before, sanded smooth by hands that fix looms. My mother stood in my doorway with a gift bag, as though a basket of muslin swaddles could be handed across the specific canyon she'd dug that day, and said, "I hope we can move past this." I want to tell you, I screamed at her. I didn't. I had spent 4 days turning the whole event over in my mind, in the particular slow way grief turns things over when there's a newborn requiring your hands and your milk and your whole depleted body, and what came out of me instead was quiet because I had learned, at last, 31 years too late, that quiet could hold more weight than shouting ever had. "You didn't lock a door," I said. "You made a decision about which daughter mattered more, and then you built a door around that decision so you wouldn't have to look at it. I'm not interested in moving past it. I'm interested in you understanding, specifically what you did and why, and I need you to say it, not apologize for it, understand it, before you hold my daughter." She did not, that day, manage to say it. She left with the gift bag still in her hand, and I let her go, and I did not cry, because I had used up the version of me that cried over her sometime around hour 9 in that basement, and what was left standing in her place was someone calmer and further away, and not available for negotiation. Priya's actual wedding, the paperwork kind, the courthouse kind, the kind that counts, happened 6 weeks later, small, 12 people, no quartet, held in Theo's backyard with a cake his sister baked. I stood beside her as her witness, Junie asleep in a wrap against my chest, and when Priya said her vows, she looked at me once, in the middle of them, the way you look at the person who taught you without meaning to what a family is supposed to protect. My mother was invited to that second wedding and came and sat in the back and did not try to rearrange the seating chart because there wasn't one, and I think that absence of a chart to control was, for her, its own kind of small reckoning. She has never, in the 2 years since, said the sentence I asked for. She has said versions around it. I handled that badly. I wasn't thinking clearly that day. Sentences built with just enough architecture to sound like an apology, while leaving the load-bearing wall, the actual ranking she made, untouched. I have stopped waiting for the specific sentence. I understand now that some people will spend the rest of their lives circling the truth about themselves without ever landing on it, and a daughter can either wait at that airport forever or go home. I went home. Callum still fixes looms, thousands of threads at a time, each one exactly where it belongs. Junie is 2 now, loud in the specific way of children who have never once doubted they were wanted. My mother sees her on Sundays, supervised at a park in daylight in public, a small, permanent condition I set the week I stopped needing her permission for anything at all. Sometimes, still, I think about that small painted-shut window in my parents' basement, the rectangle of gray sky it gave me for 13 hours, the only thing in that room that didn't belong to anyone's plan for me. I think about how I talked to my daughter through the worst hours of my life before I'd ever seen her face, promising her she was not an inconvenience, not knowing yet that the promise would turn out to be the truest thing I said that whole year. I don't hate my mother. I want to be exact about that because hate would be simpler, and I no longer trust simple things about that day. What I feel is closer to the quiet you feel standing in a room after a piano has finally stopped being tuned, the absence of a dissonance you'd stopped noticing because you'd lived inside it your whole life. I am not waiting for her anymore. I am not ranking myself against my sister anymore. I am not, above all, locked in anyone's basement anymore, and there is a specific, unspectacular piece in that sentence that no wedding, no quartet, no gift bag will ever be able to buy back. The window stayed painted shut. I had it removed the next time I visited. Asked my father, quietly, if he'd let me replace it with one that opens. He did, without asking why. Some repairs, it turns out, don't need an explanation. They just need someone willing, finally, to let the air in. Some doors are locked with keys. Others are locked with silence, timing, and a family's quiet decision about who gets to matter that day. Marisol's story isn't about revenge. It's about the moment a woman stops waiting to be chosen and starts choosing herself. The window got replaced. The ranking didn't hold. And the peace she found wasn't loud, it never is. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. New family betrayal stories drop every week, each one different, each one real. Drop a comment below. What would you have said if you were Callum, standing in that yard? And if someone in your life has ever made you feel like an inconvenience, share this video with them. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is stay quiet and let the truth speak for itself. See you in the next story.